Yeah, I'm happy to be here and follow up on the talk that Mathieu gave with some more details on how we are implementing the code of practice. So to start with the core message, which is really reiterating and refining a little what the message of the previous talk was, is that we do have the code of practice now, which is backed by a binding regulation on what frontier AI companies need to do. And it contains many powerful tools, such as independent evaluation requirements, requirements for safety and security frameworks, model reports. But there are still open questions around this, and you as the research community can make it stronger. So to recap, because on the recording not everyone will have seen the previous talk, we have the AI Act, and it requires frontier model providers to assess and mitigate systemic risks, conduct model evaluations, report serious incidents, ensure adequate cybersecurity, and other things. This is all fairly high level in the AI Act. So leading up to July 2025, we facilitated the creation of the Code of Practice written by external experts that explains what this means in more detail. And companies can voluntarily sign it, but it's important to note that yes, it's voluntary to sign it, but companies need to comply with the AI Act. If they don't want to do it via the Code of Practice, they need to do it via other adequate means and demonstrate why what they're doing is also compliant. And I think it's really the most serious work that combines technical and legal rigor to draw up a framework of what frontier AI regulation can look like. And we're now implementing this and using it in our conversations with the companies. And the code references terms like appropriate, best practices, state of the art in many places to sort of account for the rapid development. And this means that it's sort of an evolving standard, so that as the research advances, so do the requirements that companies need to follow. And so I will highlight 3 different things in the code of practice and sort of point out some of the open questions or things we're particularly excited about at the moment. So I'll touch on independent external evaluations, systemic risk acceptance justification in the model report, and risk tiers that are part of the framework. So independent external evaluations is, I think, one of the maybe most applicable things for this audience. So I'll start with a quote from the code to give you a sense of how this is phrased there. In addition to internal model evaluations, signatories will ensure that adequately qualified independent external evaluators conduct model evaluations, and the signatories will provide those evaluators with adequate access, information, time, and other resources. And here you get sort of a sense of the language that's being used that is sort of in between technical rigor, but also legally appropriate. So for example, one can then ask, what does adequately qualified here mean? And we think it means things like doing state-of-the-art modeling on the risks that are being assessed, or perhaps having published a protocol for how evaluations are being run and interpreted that the external evaluators then stick to when they do their evaluations. But one open question is, what does adequate access mean? There has been some work on this, but I think there could be more. In particular, there are many different types of risks, many different types of evaluations, and we sort of need a better understanding of what do external evaluators really need to assess a given risk or to run a given evaluation. So maybe to make it even more concrete, under which circumstances do you need access to the chain of thought, and how much of the chain of thought? So this is like a really empirical question. People need to try this out and sort of see how much benefit do we get by having access to the chain of thought, because this is, of course, quite sensitive for the company to provide. Another open question is, as we go from cases that rely on companies showing that their models aren't capable to cause systemic risk to saying that we have put mitigations in place against those systemic risks, this opens up a new type of evaluation of how do you assess the mitigations. And there are many open questions around this. Another point in the code of practice, it sort of distinguishes between pre-deployment and post-deployment evaluations. And these come with different constraints. And so, for example, for post-deployment, there are more affordances to the external evaluators, such as getting access to the chain of thought and getting access to helpful-only models when those are available. So this might be interesting and relevant for you. The second point is systemic risk acceptance justification. So this is something that providers need to put into their model report, sometimes also called similar to system cards. They need to submit these to us for every sort of major model that's being released. And here it says that the signatories will provide a detailed justification for why the systemic risks stemming from the model are acceptable. And I think here it's just important that these reports do not just show evaluation results, but sort of have a bigger picture idea of why are certain evaluations being run, how are the results being interpreted, and how does this lead to a decision on, yes, it's safe, or we believe it's safe enough to deploy a model. And I think here also the ecosystem can do more to sort of show what this can look like in a best case and how to make these decisions. And then finally, I want to touch on risk tiers. So this is something that comes from the framework. Well, this is the overall document that companies need to submit to outline how they are treating risk assessment and risk management in general. And so here the code says that the signatories will describe and justify how they will determine whether the systemic risks stemming from the model are acceptable. And to do so, they will define appropriate systemic risk tiers that are defined in terms of model capabilities and are measurable. And so this is similar to if-then commitments in some of the frameworks. And I think it's particularly important that the if part of these commitments is really tied to specific model capabilities and is measurable. We see across the public frameworks that companies have published that the quality of these varies quite a lot, both between companies, but also within a company between the different risks that they're targeting. And then one additional note on this is that for loss of control risks, these are usually operationalized via risk tiers for AI R&D capabilities. And it seems important to also consider others, in particular, strategic deception. So by strategic deception, we mean things like sandbagging, situational awareness, stealth, sabotage, all the other bad terms that start with S. That's another important axis, and understanding how this relates to loss of control and how to measure these is quite important. Okay, and then to just give you additional context on what we think useful work in this area can look like, that one thing is that the more concrete the output is or the statements are, the more helpful they can be, especially if they come also with a justification for their concreteness, right? So this also goes back to what Adam said in his keynote, that efficiency is important, and so knowing what really the big levers are that move the needle on safety is important. So having a prioritized list of these are the 3 things in a certain area that are really the core things that would deliver on safety is much better than a long list of things that would potentially be useful. Similarly, empirical testing for how much a concrete practice reduces risk is very useful. So again, going back to the example of what sort of access is adequate. Is black box access sufficient to detect misalignment? Or how far can we get with black box? What do we gain if we add something like chain of thought on top of this? And then finally, working directly with companies, both in the US, but maybe also in other regions, to pilot certain access methodologies or just other techniques is really useful, because then we have the empirical evidence that it works and we can actually see it in practice. So to summarize, I went through 3 specific areas of the code of practice that I think are particularly exciting and have some open research questions that you can support. So independent external evaluations, acceptance justification, and risk tiers. And for these, as well as other areas, the code has lots of levers for your research to make a difference. And so I think, just as Mathieu said, this sort of goes hand in hand. You can deliver better methods for increasing safety, and we can make sure they're being used by the companies. Thank you.